What we inherited from this past administration is like disgraceful. In a matter of weeks, the task force has made the largest number of arrests of cartel leaders, operatives, and gang members in American history, more than...
October 30th, 2025. Agents stormed the California governor's home and seized over 13 pounds of heroin and a pile of loaded handguns inside. The state's highest office holder betrayed America, but the real shock came when they reached the room this official never meant anyone to see.
A raid today at a home in Rosemead is being linked to an international drug trafficking bust. The FBI says more than 40 pounds of meth and $100,000 was seized. Sky Fox over the scene on New Avenue as more than a dozen people were detained outside of a house as warrants were served.
October 30th, 2025 was just another night for Los Angeles. However, at 3:45 a.m., while most of the city slept under the dim haze of streetlights, a silent federal convoy was making its way into a quiet neighborhood along Benedict Canyon Drive that did not show up on any municipal zoning files. No address, no owner, no digital footprint. The house did not appear on any official database, which was reason enough for them to forge on with the operation. Agents from multiple federal units had zeroed in on the property and had been watching it for weeks. They were aware that someone with enormous influence and capable of erasing records at the highest levels had their hand deep into this. And with each passing second, the unsettling question that these agents kept asking themselves was, who had the power to make an entire residence vanish from the public record? The answer landed like a punch to the chest. The property was covertly controlled by Governor Victor Hawthorne, the man sworn to protect the very people surrounding his hidden door. On the command signal, the breach team advanced, and the first impact advanced and shattered the illusion instantly. The interior did not resemble the home that seemed ordinary from the outside. Far from it, it resembled a bunker. Chemical smells clung to the air, while tools and equipment lay scattered across steel work tables. In all the melee, a false bookshelf creaked open just from the shockwave of the entry, revealing a secret tunnel descending into darkness. Immediately, agents made their way down the passage with their weapons raised. At the tunnel's end, a small chamber opened up, a cramped workstation lined with latex gloves, weighing scales, sealing tools, and bricks of high-grade narcotics. They were so well stacked, it was as if they were inventory in a warehouse. To add on to that, 3 pistols lay within arm's reach of a chair, a confirmation that someone had spent long hours down there, perhaps processing the product and packing it into bricks. But that was not even the worst discovery of that night. Behind a heavy sound-insulated door, agents found what no one expected to see, especially in a house connected to a high-ranking government official. Right in front of their eyes was a kidnapped woman who seemed to be in her 20s, chained, dehydrated, and terrified. It was clear that the condition she was kept in was meant to silence her indefinitely. That scene alone turned the operation from suspicion to nightmare. In addition to that, everything shifted from being about potential political misconduct to a scandal waiting to erupt in a way no one envisioned. This house right here was the entry point into an entire hidden world that would leave even the most seasoned investigators beyond shocked. Immediately the raid was over. Investigators at the Federal Command Center began piecing together the fragments of Hawthorne's double life. What they uncovered was far from a simple criminal operation. Instead, everything pointed toward an industrial system built to operate in total darkness, and evidence was in plenty to prove all that. We're talking about crates of heroin discovered in storage lockers, ledgers encoded with symbols only insiders understood, and countless hours of surveillance footage showing shipments passing through the city at times when most people were asleep. Digital forensics teams also sifted through multiple encrypted devices that had been seized. And with each folder in each of these devices, a coded message was discovered or a secret meeting between the criminal entity's leadership and the operatives. Video evidence uncovered hundreds of encounters between Hawthorne and multiple young women, some not even in their early 20s. And yet, despite all these, it still felt like they were only scratching the surface. On the other side, the financial crimes team was busy solving the puzzle. The deeper the team dug, the clearer it became that they were not looking at 1 or 2 fake companies. Instead, they were dealing with 27 companies scattered across Los Angeles County. These were either restaurants with almost no customers, repair shops that never seemed to fix anything, or consulting firms with no staff at all. On paper, they raised zero suspicion. Bars, strip clubs, and spas were also part of these companies. But in practice, they were nothing more than dirty money laundromats. they had been established in such a manner that they quietly and efficiently helped move millions through accounts that never stayed open long enough to raise alarms. And just when investigators thought they had gotten to the bottom of all these, a darker twist emerged. They discovered that behind the glossy storefronts was a prostitution trafficking network involving over 200 victims, many of whom had been moved across state lines using medical files that were completely fabricated, yet looked authentic enough to fool hospital systems. Others had not even come from the US at all. They were brought in from abroad, mainly from Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia. Investigators found that the majority of these victims had been brought into the country using the very same political connections Hawthorne flaunted at public events. The routes used to actualize this had been marked with precision, with motels, clinics, and backroom apartments being preferred to avoid detection. Then came the elephant in the room, the drugs pipeline. As the investigation deepened, it turned out that Hawthorne's crew was not just pushing heroin, they were also deeply involved in the distribution of tons of meth, fentanyl, and precursor chemicals that fed other criminal networks. Analysts traced the money and found it looping through offshore accounts, bouncing across continents before reappearing in California disguised as profits from shipping, real estate, and even children's clothing boutiques. In one specific transaction, $430,000 vanished into multiple bank accounts in Panama. It was then traced to the Cayman Islands, where thousands of hedge funds and holding companies operate with minimal disclosure requirements. From there, a slice of cash hopped to Belize before making its way back to the US disguised as legitimate profit. Things became even more unsettling upon the realization of the extent of the protection that this network was getting from within the federal system. Imagine multiple warehouses being flagged by the DEA, only for them to receive mysterious clearances by state officers before federal teams could intervene. Reports also started surfacing about inspectors that had attempted to speak up, only to be transferred, silenced, or threatened with severe consequences of their careers. A number of licensing officers also gave accounts of how they were pressured into approving permits despite raising serious questions about the applicants. Some even narrated how they had received late-night visits from individuals that made it clear that refusing to cooperate was flatly not an option. Others were fired within 48 hours after filing a complaint. For many agents, this was a shocking discovery, since it was the governor and not a cartel with which they normally deal with. The corruption was huge. With time, the truth was surfacing on how Hawthorne had used his position in government, not to serve the public, but to develop a criminal network of drugs, prostitution, and human trafficking that reached far beyond the border of Los Angeles. But now it was time to take down the illegitimate empire. Before moving on to that, subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss out on the shocking next parts. What followed was a highly coordinated joint operation on the governor's criminal empire. November 11, 2025, 3:45 a.m. Inside a sealed federal command room deep within the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown Los Angeles, leaders of multiple federal units were busy going through final paperwork to ensure everything was in order. Everything had to be precise, failure to which the entire operation would collapse before it had even started. At 3:52 a.m., teams across Los Angeles County and 5 neighboring counties were given the green light. Armored SUVs rolled out simultaneously from FBI, ICE, DEA, and U.S. Marshals staging bases. Each of these convoys had a target tied directly to Hawthorne's empire. No one expected a smooth surrender, yet no one foresaw just how violently this empire would fight back. The first target was Westlake, where what seemed like an ordinary recovery clinic that claimed to offer late-night wellness treatments and addiction detox sessions hid an underground trafficking hub. Upon breaching the front doors, the agents immediately encountered armed guards who opened fire, forcing a chaotic gunfight in the narrow lobby. In the end, the armed guards were subdued, and the agents managed to push deeper inside into the property. There, they discovered 42 women crammed into locked rooms, many trembling, dehydrated, and disoriented. They also found documents which showed that they were bound to be transported on the following day just before sunrise. Barely minutes later, another team stormed another property that housed a small clothing factory located on East 15th Street in the fashion district that never marketed itself. Inside, the team found steel cages, surveillance screens cataloging victims, and large bags of meth stuffed behind soundproof panels. Several operatives attempted to escape through a concealed exit behind one of the steel cages. However, luck was not on their side, as the marshals caught them as they emerged into an alley behind the warehouse, blocking their getaway before they even stepped into the morning air. In Vernon, federal trucks boxed in a building that posed as a studio that advertised for influencer shoots. However, on the inside, the reality was far off different. They were modified forklifts built to hide drugs under false bottom crates, along with a staggering stash of heroin and fentanyl. Just as was the case in Westlake, the operatives here were not about to go down without a fight. They hid behind cargo racks and opened fire at the team of agents. However, in less than 2 minutes, the agents had cleared the floor and taken every operative into custody. But perhaps the most successful aspect of the entire operation was experienced in East LA, where agents raided an unregistered casino that operated completely off the books. An extensive search around the premises eventually led the team to the slot machines and card tables. Behind them, millions in cash were cleverly stashed away. Investigators later put the amount at about $2.3 million. Also seized in the raid were multiple encrypted ledgers that detailed the flow of money through Hawthorne's global criminal network. By 4:55 a.m., every team leader had radioed in to confirm the success of their respective operations. Block by block, the governor's empire was collapsing quicker than a house of cards. But as the agents celebrated the breakthroughs, a chilling reality was still hanging in the air. Victor Hawthorne was still inside City Hall, and yet no one knew how he had prepared himself for the imminent raid. By 6:33 a.m., as Los Angeles was slowly coming to life, a new classified directive hit the command center. City Hall was no longer a political landmark. It was now designated an active target. With that, the sole objective among the federal teams involved was to breach the building and take Governor Victor Hawthorne into custody before he could vanish or destroy what remained of his operation. When tactical units reached City Hall, they were met with aggressive force from Hawthorne's off-the-books private security force. By the time the confrontation was over and the units reached Hawthorne's office, they were met by the smell of burning paper. It became apparent that the governor had attempted to do away with evidence that could place him right at the center of the criminal syndicate. Hawthorne himself stood at the center of the wreckage, sweating, furious, insisting he was the victim of a political ambush, even as agents moved to restrain him. In the next few hours, a multi-state task force was formed to hunt down Hawthorne's remaining accomplices scattered across Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. In the meantime, big groups of press and crowds of protesting citizens emerged, where they were shouting and crying about the corrupt actions of Hawthorne. Civilians just couldn't believe that the man that they had voted for had betrayed them deeply. Even when he is in custody, the aftermath of his dirty work left a massive negative impact on California. And just like that, the man who promised to protect millions now sat in handcuffs, his empire in ruins. But one question still remained. Who else within the system is still living a double life?